Okay, everybody, welcome. I'm sorry that we have a few moments delay here, and I wanted to thank everybody for joining us. We have quite a few folks who have come in the system. I see that we have some questions that have already popped in. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm going to make sure I'm checking in with the moderator. Moderator, are we on live? Do you hear my voice?
I hear you fine. And
great, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Well, I wanted to welcome everybody to this webinar. We've got a lot we can talk about. We've got some questions that have already come in. We've got some ideas we can share with you about how the economy has been evolving in the recent events. And we can also talk a little bit about some things that are happening with the software that'll make you more prepared than ever before for handling your business and making things really great. So if you have questions, you're welcome to type them into the chat window. You can also ask to speak and have your voice heard on the webinar as well. If you can raise your hand with the speak button in your control panel. I see we have quite a number of folks who have joined us, so please bear with us if you have some questions and we didn't get to right away. I do want to acknowledge first that there was somebody who asked a question earlier, and I want to make sure we can discuss that topic right away. Which is how to interpret a D neighborhood and how that's going to make things a little bit easier for you to do what you need to do on the ground when you get an address and you put it on the map and you're not sure whether you should pursue it. All right, so here what we have is an example of a neighborhood that's D. Let's say the broker has given you an address and it pops up on the map right about here. So you can see, I believe, where I'm pointing on the screen, that we are looking right here at this spot where we have a possibility. Does that show up the pointer there? Moderator, can you confirm that we have a pointer right below the green and right in the blue area there above Allison Street?
I'm not seeing your cursor, although it did flicker. Oh, it flickers on and off there. It's a little
flickers on and off. So what I'll do is I'll use my little dots here, and I will put a little pointer here. This should help us. So if we had an address that showed up right there, do you see a little dot on the map now?
Yep.
Okay, so let's say you got the address and it popped in for there. Should you pursue it? Well, the first thing I would like to say is you would only want to ever consider anything in a D neighborhood of any kind, really, in a market you know really well, particularly one that you live in. Second thing is, generally speaking, we're not really interested in trying to pursue D neighborhood properties because they require a lot more attention, and as you get more experienced in your work, you can probably do some better things with them in the future than you can do now. You really kind of have to have some experience with you in order to handle some of the issues that come up with working with properties in some of the D areas. They tend to, for example, have lots of deferred maintenance, so they require lots of really good management. And that's something that can get easier with time. The next thing I'd like to mention to you is that this particular neighborhood, as you can see by the thin white lines that surround it, the neighborhood itself is only one D neighborhood. And that's a little bit more of a possibility because we have actually A, B, C, and D all around it. Actually, A, B, and C, I should say, all around it. When you get to areas where there's 2 and 3 and 4 D neighborhoods connecting all together, that's an area that would definitely be a little bit less of where you want to go in your first several acquisitions. If you were to have a dot show up on the map that was in this corner like we've described here, where you're close to a C, you're close to a B, you're close to an A, it's in your market, it's only one D area, I wouldn't say it's a green light, it's go. It would be go get more information. You might want to find out what's causing this area to be a D area. So you could, for example, do a little more research online. Maybe you could find out whether or not there's new construction in that area. If you live in the area, maybe you could go drive and take a look and see what you see and see whether or not you see signs of change and signs of growth. See if you can characterize the multifamilies in the area. A lot of times when you have a D neighborhood like this, it's simply an area that just has not yet had an opportunity to expand and grow with the growth that's around it. It's a little bit further away. Now, for those of you who are familiar with this metropolitan area, you might know that we've got some tremendous growth down here in where the dot is now. So what's happening is there's growth moving up this corridor. So in case we did get a dot where it was in that corner there, that might actually be a good one. And if you were to go there in person today, you would see where that dot is. There's actually new construction. A small multi-unit is being squeezed in among some row houses. You don't ever want to be on the very front end and trying to change a neighborhood, but if you see others are beginning to transform a neighborhood and they're putting money into it, not just one, but 2 or 3 or 4 projects and there's other favorable things going on, it might be worth considering. But generally speaking, I don't really advise it. I think you're much better off if you get it pops up on a D, you're much better off just moving on to the next possibility and staying focused on your C and B areas, particularly your C assets in your B areas. So that gives you a little bit of background on that. It's not your best case scenario at all. I'd want you to be very, very, very cautious. And you want to get a lot more information and data as to what's going on in that area before you could ever be comfortable with it. It definitely is a sign that you want to go with caution, if not really just move on to another opportunity. Okay, I hope that answers that question. Do we have any other questions that we could get to at this time?
Oh, Scott, I'm able to mark the chat items as a question.
Okay, great. Somebody's having trouble hearing, I see. I'm not sure why. Huh. Maybe there's speakers on there and they're not quite up to go. Anything else that came up there that we have as a question? Okay, all right. So what I'd like to do now, if we don't have any questions waiting right now, feel free to type in a question in the chat and raise your hand to speak, and we can put you on with your voice so you don't have to type everything if you don't want to. What we could talk about now is some of the features that are in the system that some of you might not have had a chance to take advantage of. While we're on this map, I'm going to show you how the zip code capability works, which is really wonderful. What we can do now is put on the zip code boundaries so that we can see on the map where the boundaries of individual zip codes are, because a lot of our brokers tell us that they have, are you interested in a zip code? And then they give you a number. And so, for example, here they might give you a particular zip code 20011, and there would be parts of 20011 you may have more interest in than others. So with this, you can actually put that zip code on the map. You can find out generally where they're talking about when they refer to a zip code by its number, and then you could be a little more thoughtful. Then sometimes what will happen is you'll put the zip code boundaries on and you realize that most of the zip code is not in an area that's productive for you. So you would be able to then redirect away and say, that's not a particularly favorable zip code, although, you know, looking to the south, and you might refer to a zip code that might be a little bit more beneficial. For example, maybe 20017 has a bit more of what you're looking for. You can then share that with everybody. Another feature that we've added that I think has been one of the great additions for how to make this a little more smooth and fluid is what happens is people will sometimes turn on, for example, their emerging markets map, and all of a sudden their whole map goes completely gray. And that can get a little bit confusing. So what we've done is we've made it so that instead of trying to figure out where you are and what's going on, you can do a national reset. We have this below the plus and minus of the zoom in and zoom out. You have an American flag over the shape of the United States. When you click that once, what it will do is it will bring you back to your standard view of the whole US and kind of just start over again, get your bearings, figure out where you are. A lot of times what happens is you're in what's referred to in emerging market status as not emerging. So it's all gray and it looks weird and you don't remember that you flipped over to emerging markets. So if you ever get confused, check the level that you're looking at or just press your reset button and start over. That can be very helpful. While we're talking about markets, we have added a new feature here. And one of the great requests we've been having repeatedly from many folks is that when you press the button of the printer on the emerging markets map, you can now have a printout, a PDF, if you will, of the different kinds of emerging markets and organize them as you want. A lot of people, what they want really is just, what are my new emerging markets? I want to find out what those are. So I'm going to put a check mark there next to new emerging markets. These are the ones that have just popped in over the last 2 years. They're not 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. Those are continuing emerging. And by the way, when we talk about new emerging, it doesn't mean that markets that aren't new emerging aren't good ones. Your backyard is usually a good market. There's always distressed properties and distressed sellers, and every time that whether the economy is good, the economy is not so good. So you should continue to look in your backyard. But if you're looking for a new market and you see a market that's favorable to your conditions, the fact that it's not emerging doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad market. It just doesn't have the criteria needed to be classified as a market that has just become to the emerging stage. What you would do now is print your market data list, and that's going to create for you a display of the printouts. Now I think on here, because of the way this works, I need to change what I'm showing you. I'm going to turn the screen share on with my display, and I think you'll see the report pop up there on the screen for you. And it's a PDF file that we generate for you. Why did that not work? Oh, I love technology. Bear with me, folks. I clicked on it and it didn't seem to want to share it with you, and I'm not sure why. Oh, okay. Well, it's a display issue. Let's try Chrome tab and see if it lets me do this one here and share that. There we go. All right, so this is a list of all the markets that are in the emerging status. Now, I did ask it to alphabetize it A to Z, but you could also put it in the order of the population size. And so we only have a handful of markets in the emerging status in the most recent data cut. And you can see a vast majority of these markets are very small tertiary markets, particularly in the south and the west of the country. But we also want to recognize that at this point, we really don't have much knowledge about what markets are emerging presently. We basically had a big button on the control desk that stopped the economy and changed a whole lot of measures. And I would not use this list now to help decide what market to go into next. This list can help you understand what's happened in the rearview mirror now that we're into a brand new environment, brand new economy. It can help you understand how hot the market had gotten, how long we had been pursuing growth. We had been going for more than 10 years, and usually your smaller tertiary markets are the last to join in. The economy was so robust that LA went through 2 up cycles and one cool off, not negative, but cool off period in between. So it was a new emerging twice in that 10-year span. So it was sort of time to do a little bit of a reset. Everybody was waiting for it. It was going to happen sometime. And, shoe was going to drop. We knew it. It just kind of went a little differently than we all expected. I think there are some questions here. Is anyone, let's see, can we filter just new emerging markets in this tool? Yes, that's what we've done here. These are just the new emerging. And the emerging markets, the not new emerging markets, are markets that are 3 and 4 and 5 and more years emerging. Some have been just going like crazy. Like I can think of Nashville. I think Charlotte's just won't stop. Notice on your list here too that I'm displaying now that the size category is now part of your market view. I'm going to change our screen view again. We're going to go back to the map, and give me a second to do that. I think it lets me just click on the screen share here and select that we're going to be looking at the Chrome tab that is the map. And there it is. So on this map here, we can see that there are a bunch of markets that are showing up as different colors, the gray, the green that's dark, the green that's light. And if I were to point to a particular market here, let's say I'm looking in, let's do South Dakota here. I point to this market and I click on that market. What's going to happen is if I click on it once gently, it's going to tell us the name of the market, the size in population, the size in category, and its status in the emerging. We're going to keep adding new capabilities to this. We're going to more descriptors to these markets. The new version that's coming out will have some of those new capabilities, including a comma where they belong and all these little tiny little things to make things more and more useful. What data is comprised in our indicator emerging markets? That's a great question. So when you learn about emerging markets, and hopefully you've all had a chance to go to one of the training sessions that teaches you on emerging markets from RE Mentor, I have been following very closely the Emerging Real Estate book that David Lindahl wrote. So if you haven't read that, what we're looking at is growth. We're looking for demographic and economic variables that indicate that a market is growing. I know that David Lindahl uses a criteria of trying to focus on markets that are more than 200,000, and that is something I would also recommend. It's a lot harder to find a buyer when you're ready to sell in a market that is smaller. I have not filtered on 200,000 as yet, but I do look at whether or not the growth of the market, both economically and population-wise, with an emphasis on job growth, is reflected in order to meet these criteria. Occasionally we'll get a market get a classification that on this map would show up as white. If you ever see that, it's because the market is new or different in shape than it had been previously. It's a challenge we have. We don't have enough historical data because it's a new market. Nobody was tracking things there, or boundaries changed. There's very little we can do about that, but it'll affect very few of you very few times. So don't worry about it. It's just in case you were curious as to why some markets are showing up as a white blob on the map. So that, I hope, answers your question. We are going to see probably when we do our Emerging Markets 2020, it is entirely possible that some markets will show up as emerging in the traditional sense, because the data that's gathered for this preceded the major change in the economy in March. So we would want to make sure everybody understood that. And we'll put some notes on the map that this is where things were headed until the markets made a major correction. We're also probably going to see next year, 2020, 21, that we might even have emerging markets that be completely absent across the country for one cycle. That would not surprise me at all. All right, so let's see. Hopefully that answered your question. Is there a projected date for the return of the market cycles feature that I lost in November? Yes, you lost it. We took it offline because we didn't want to keep having people use data that we thought was no longer as fresh as it needed to be in order to be instructive. We focused our resources on providing you what you have here with the emerging markets so that you can stay focused on the markets that were growing, which is where you really wanted to focus. And just assume pretty much that all the other markets are going to be in a seller's market stage 2. In other words, they're cooling off or they're beginning to cool off. And in this case, I think just about every market has cooled off. So it is a feature we're going to return to the system. We already have the placeholders here. As you can see, the market cycles are coming back again soon. And one of the other things that we're doing about that is we're trying to build it out so that you can actually see those cycles as they are in time. So for example, you could see what was it a year ago, what was it 2 years ago, what was it 3 years ago. So in order for us to do that properly, we've pulled the data set and we're remaking it so that it can be more instructive and clearer to you on how to use it. I'm glad that it was useful to you. But for now, what you'll want to keep focusing on is your emerging markets and your backyard. Again, over and over again, I want everybody to think that there are opportunities in your market where you live. There are distressed properties, there's distressed sellers, there are distressed sellers with distressed properties. Your out-of-town owners will be particularly distressed at this time. So there's where you should be focused. This is probably not the best time for you to be spending time and money trying to chase after a market that's far away, that requires you to stay in hotels, get on airplanes, and things like that. So stay in your backyard for now would be my particular perspective on things. And as soon as we can get that data together, we will gladly add that to how you can keep using this system. I think we're all just kind of catching our breath now. Do we have any other questions in here? I don't see anything at the moment. What I would like to review with everybody is a few thoughts about where the economy is going and what's happened recently. I'm sure you've seen quite a bit in the news on this. Some of these items may overlap with things you've already learned, but I thought maybe as a collective thought as to we have another emergency vehicle going by. I hope that's not too loud for everybody. But as we have a number of things that have changed in the way we're going to have opportunities in the marketplace, it's going to be a different economy, at least for the short term, if not for a midterm, and who knows past that. It's way too early to speculate. The biggest question I always get is, well, what are going to be the emerging markets when things start to turn around? Where should we be? And I already mentioned you should be in your backyard because you don't have to travel, and you do have opportunities that are probably nearby. We don't know how long it's going to take for things to get better. We don't know which markets are going to be favorable and unfavorable. If this was a traditional recovery, we would expect potentially with the cycles that we've been seeing. And we had a double dip recession in 1980. It lasted over 3.5 years. We had a dot-com bust. People might remember that around 2000. That lasted 4 years. Our Great Recession took more than 6 years to really get the economy back on full track. So we just don't know. So it could be that we have major metros popping up again first, like it would normally make sense, what we usually see in a recovery. We see markets that are on the coasts, the primaries like the Bostons, New Yorks, Miami's, the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, et cetera. They usually pop first, and then not soon thereafter, we see markets like Chicago come online, and then we start seeing some of the secondary markets do well, and then eventually the tertiary markets. But the challenge we have here is we're not really sure how people are going to react to all of this. Are there going to be a lot of people more concerned about living in dense areas? Are they going to be less likely to want to live in a densely populated metropolitan area if they're going to be allowed to telecommute? Will their employers allow them to live maybe where they grew up in a smaller market somewhere away from the bigger cities? We don't know, really don't know. So it's really speculative at this point about which markets to go into, which ones to be thoughtful about from a traditional standpoint. But what you can do is think about, well, where would growth or change be most prevalent? Right now, what we're seeing is a bunch of industries having major transformations already underway. Education is a big one. I mentioned to a lot of folks that there are oftentimes markets that have a strong reliance on education as part of its robust capability. We may not have that going forward. I know the University of California system has already said they will not be having in-person classes this fall. Who knows what the dominoes will be from that in terms of people's willingness to travel and be in close quarters like that. We may go much more online. That could go across much of our education spectrum. So maybe there are going to be jobs that are lost potentially physically on campus, but maybe there are new jobs in creating online learning and education. So where are tech companies? They can be anywhere. There are some markets at strong tech economies like Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Austin, the Bay Area with Silicon Valley and many others, Salt Lake City, many others have very strong tech economies. But the question would be which one of those are going to tie into that new need for education. We don't know for sure. Markets that have medical research going on, maybe actually that would be a market perspective that could help with actual physical jobs, because it's really kind of hard to do research in a lab that's in your home office. So, when you need to go into a lab somewhere like at the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic or places like that. So maybe that would actually be a physical market that would potentially have at least some stability or some growth. Our travel and tourism industry is reeling from this. Airline travel is down more than 95%. So anything that's relating to hotels and travel, your Disney worlds, your resort locations, your Vail, none of those are going to be easy to bring back. So be careful if the market is dependent, like Las Vegas, et cetera, on a lot of tourism. Be careful with markets that are highly energy focused. So much of Texas and Oklahoma, and of course the Dakotas. We really don't know where energy prices are going to go and whether or not there's going to be a favoring still for growth in renewables, or if oil and the price of oil has been decimated by this. Maybe that will reset that and make us burn more oil instead of building more solar panels. We really just don't know. So I would be very leery of going to markets that are heavily dependent on energy. I would be leery of markets that are very heavily dependent on retirement. We really don't know whether or not people are going to think of retirement in the same way for a lot of reasons. And one in particular would be, do parents, do people who want to retire, do kids with their parents wanting to retire want to be apart from each other? Do they want to have that much distance as a result of what we've been experiencing lately? We should probably see new household formation change as well. It's going to be harder for people to have jobs when they graduate from high school and college. So it's going to be harder for them to sustain themselves independently. So there'll be a little more stay-at-home periods, as well as maybe people consolidating, and that might actually affect the rental market pretty strongly, because there'll be more demand for rental units, particularly the more modern style of the 2 bedrooms, where the bedrooms are separate from each other on opposite ends. That's been much more common in the construction and style from about 1990 on. Any markets that are heavily dependent on entertainment, it's very hard to deliver or even produce entertainment in this new understanding. Retail is hurting very badly. So sectors or submarkets that are dependent entirely on retail are a bit of a challenge. The office market has changed substantially. Do people really want to go to an office anymore if they don't have to? Auto sales are down because people aren't commuting right now. People may not commute the way they used to. although some might commute more because we might have a situation where people actually don't want to get on a bus or a train to get to work anymore. So there's a whole bunch of stuff we just don't know. The bottom line for me would be that we have a growth in some sectors of the economy that are related to medicine and vaccine production and antibodies and healthcare delivery. You'll see statistics showing that the health industry is losing a lot of jobs, and that's because those people are not trained for emergency care. So they're not delivering service right now. They're being laid off from where services are not as urgent, dentist's office and things like that. So that's a challenge. So that's a lot more I could tell you about. Maybe we could cover even more of this on another discussion and another webinar. I think we have some more questions. I'd like to get over here to see what we got. Let's see. I did get alerted to a question. Let me see if I can find it for everybody. I don't see an additional question that was asked. I've been alerted and I don't see it.
Noel,
okay. Noel's joining us. Hey, Noel.
Disappeared.
Noel has disappeared. Oh, Noel. Hopefully she can come back and join us.
Feel free to ask again.
Absolutely. I hope some of you had a chance to take advantage of 2.8. This would be a great time for me to tell you what's being worked on right now. We are refreshing the neighborhood markets. So, for example, in micro neighborhoods, the data that you have here now is going to be refreshed. And what we're trying to do as well is make it so that you can not only see the data that you have already present here, but also that you can see the historical data. So, for example, the data that's there now reflects the data from another data cut. We would keep this online and give you the new stuff so you could see where the changes are occurring. So we're really excited about that. We're also building out our new emerging markets data for the new year. Don't know when that's going to be released. One of my data sources has not come in yet, so I don't want to push that out to you all until I'm more confident in what it's revealing. We are working on the market cycles again. So that'll be coming out. We have some new capabilities that are going to be added to the system that'll allow you to control more things. So you're going to be excited when we launch 3.0. We are planning a launch very soon. And so I would encourage everyone who's joining us now. I think almost all of you, I see we do have a question coming in. So hold just a moment. I wanted to finish this thought, which is that I would encourage everybody to maybe get in the habit of checking, even if you don't have a site to look up, come on to the RE Indicator website here where you draw your maps and check on that front page to see whether or not the pop-ups that are there are announcing something new. So for example, there's an upcoming webinar, maybe there's a new version of the software that's been released and you can watch the video and various things like that. So maybe make a habit of picking a time of the week that maybe every Monday morning at 9 o'clock or every Thursday at 3 or whatever you can set your timer to, grab a view of the screen to make sure that you have the latest information. All right, so I think I have an ability now to allow somebody to ask a question. Yes, Noel, I'm going to allow Noel to speak. Noel, it will take a few moments for it to give you approval. So if you'll just wait a moment while it kicks in, look forward to hearing your question. Okay. Max numbers of boundary. Okay, hold on just a second here. I need to go here. And then I'm going to go here. All right, Noel. So I've clicked you as a possible speaker here, and it'll give you a few seconds. It'll probably ask you to verify that your microphone is working, and you'll be able to join us in a moment. We are planning to do these discussions on a routine basis. I'll be sending a poll out at some point to see how often people are interested in hearing these conversations and getting to know more and be able to ask questions. Noel, you've joined us in the room. Welcome. And what is your question? Okay, I'm not hearing Noel. I know that she's in the room and I don't hear Noel's voice. Absolutely no reason why that would be the case. Let's turn that off. Noelle, I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you. I did give you permission to give us your voice, and it's not coming through. Your connection is not working. So with that, perhaps you could ask it as a chat, and I'll make sure that it gets through. Okay. I see. Yes. Can we use our mics? Do we have to type the question? You should be able to use your mic. I did give you that permission. I'm surprised it's not letting you speak. Let me just double check on here. It does say you're online. I'm really sorry about that. I've tested this a number of times. It should really be working. It's not working as it has in the tests. Let's try this. No, it does not. It's not letting me turn your sound on or off. So I'm really sorry about that, Noelle. Perhaps you could just type that in there, and we will certainly take your question as a text. Okay, we have a question here. If you have a broker that has a discrepancy with the RE indicator and the neighborhood score, how should we approach the difference? Excellent question. I get this a lot. I actually don't think providing the broker with the score from RE indicator is all that helpful. What I think it can do is help keep you on track and keep you focused on the parts of the market that are better. They have different knowledge and different information from different angles. And what we've seen many times, and has been true in other studies in other ways, is that people who are in a local market are oftentimes attuned to one set of ideas, but they may not be attuned to another set that what we're looking for and looking to focus on. They're oftentimes some of the last people to know that a market has improved or maybe actually isn't doing so well. It's not that they're doing anything wrong intentionally. It's just a matter of having everything so close to you. It's very hard to see the forest from the trees when you're at that granular level that they sometimes are. So I would not focus at all in any conversations with any brokers about what your neighborhood score is for a particular property. It should just be used for you in two separate ways. The first is when a broker gives you a property, is it in a criteria that is working for you? Is it in a location that you can work with and can be worth your time? When you've decided that it is, and you keep exploring and deciding that you maybe are interested in that property, you now have a better sense of maybe what direction you could take with your tenant base, with your value add upgrades, with your whole exit strategy. That all should be part of what's in your mind. And as you think through, obviously you're looking at your underwriting, and that's determining whether or not the numbers are good enough to buy. But it can help you with your overall strategy, your plans for what kind of development you like to do with it. Are you going to try to modernize the kitchens or not, based on what you see on this information? And that's not really going to help the broker to know that criteria. The other place that's really helpful is when you are getting ready to discuss with your potential investor partners what kind of research you've done, where it is on the map regarding to the neighborhood types and classifications, and why this particular area is favorable and maybe even better than some other areas, or as good as some other areas. So it's really helpful to communicate with your investor brokers, really not as much with the not investor brokers, your investor partners. It's not helpful to communicate with your brokers. It's really not part of the back and forth that the two of you should be having. I think you should focus on what do they have available, and then whether or not it's fitting your criteria. If you find the criteria that you've given them is leading to a whole bunch of properties showing up in a lot of D areas or D with a lot of C nearby, and you're not seeing growth in that area on your own. Remember, data is only one piece of information, should never be used to make a decision. If you don't see additional data suggesting the area is on an up cycle, it's now in a path of progress, for example, then you really shouldn't be spending your time on it. And discussing with the broker that area is not right, it's showing up as D on my map, is not really going to be helpful. You can say, I'm looking for something that is in an area that's growing a bit more, or I'm looking for something that doesn't need as much attention to deferred maintenance. So focus on the things that maybe be driving that particular property out of your criteria, because they want you to, it's the car they have on the lot that they'd like to sell you. So use your information judiciously, carefully, and it's really not helpful to share it with them because it gets too much like you're battling for the right piece of data, because there's no one right piece of data. It's a whole complex of data that you need to work with. I hope that's helpful. Noel, I see that you have typed in your question. I've heard many people say you should start investing in your backyard. However, for people like me who live in New York, where the property costs are very high, do you have any advice? I have looked at properties in New York City area, and there are a lot of competition with larger groups trying to buy multifamily as well. Absolutely, very much the case. Noel, you're right. And that's the challenge that we've been having for the last 4 or 5 years after the major metros had their big upcycle. Not only did the smaller investors, but the bigger and institutional and larger groups, institutional buyers, the hedge funds, the REITs, they all went, the insurance companies, they went diving into the markets that tend to do very well. And they soaked up all the good opportunities, and it was some pickings for us. And the cap rates are really compressed in the big markets like that. Seattle, San Francisco, LA, they all have these problems. So what I often suggest is that there are absolutely still some smaller properties that have a distressed seller or a distressed asset, a person experiencing divorce, or a business arrangement that needs to be altered or changed or terminated, a property that needs to be better managed, that maybe it's actually in pretty good shape. They put those new countertops in and the place is looking really well, but they just don't have the right property manager on board. So they're not turning a profit with it, but maybe the underwriting can show you that better management can help. You can also look on the more mid bands that surround the major metros. So Noel, I know you're in the New York area, and I happen to grow up in that area, Noel, as you know. I would start to look in the band of places that are like in Nassau County, in Westchester County, mid Westchester. You go up to sometimes you go to Orange County. There's places in New Jersey that they all can be very favorable. The other thing that we could think about now is that now that the market has had this big correction, that there's a lot less people looking, and there may still be some buyers who are ready to sell. They may still have some crazy prices, and eventually they'll come to their senses. This is one of the best times ever to find those 10 unit, 20 unit, 30 unit, 50 unit that are owned by somebody out of state. So you could use something like a mailing service that gives you access to criteria. I want all the under 100 unit or under a certain classification of size or price in a certain state. It could be in this case in New York, even in a county. And I want where the owner is on record is out of state, and get one of those mailings going. Had tremendous luck with that. It really is fruitful. They're going to have a lot more incentive to think about disposing of a property when they don't know how long this is going to go. So it should also be more careful with all your acquisitions. Everybody, as we go through this, we don't know where this is going. We don't know how this is headed. It's one of the best times to get ready, get your pencils sharp. You may not be able to justify the cap rates that the sellers still want. You may be nervous about the tenant base. We've seen a huge fall off from April to May in on-time rent payments that tend to affect the C properties and the C areas the most. And of course, we're not really looking at a lot of D properties in D areas, so that's not something we're even considering at the moment. But it could begin to start to affect more properties in more areas. So you'd have to make sure you're really going in with something very strong. Your economic occupancies must be really robust to make sure you're taking it on. It's also a good time to start thinking about some creative financing, some issues where the seller can be a part of the transaction, can help you, can defer some of the payment, so that they can stop worrying about it. You can become basically the person on the front line dealing with the issues of the property, and they can take a step back and stop worrying. So those hopefully will be some helpful ideas. The Northeast traditionally is really saddled with some challenges with cap rates, but I keep an eye on it. I think we're going to 6 months from now we'll have a whole lot more knowledge about what might be headed to us, and I don't think we can make any guesses as to what other markets to look at until we get into probably December. The big word that we really need to consider here is that before people feel really comfortable about their jobs and people start going back in large numbers to community gatherings and getting a lot of this robust sector of the economy where people spend their money going again, is when we have a vaccine that we know works. So We're a ways off from that. So in the meantime, keep your eyes out and keep your broker relationships strong. They're going to have a lot of stuff to look at, I'm going to guess, and then you're just going to see the cap rates are still in their, their dreamy state. They're just hoping they can still get that $10 million for something they bought for 5, when really today it's maybe only worth 6 or 7. And we're not even sure how long that's going to be. Definitely don't think about your quick turns right now. I don't think it's very plausible to think about scooping up a bargain and selling it in a year from now, because we don't know where we're going to be a year from now. We have no idea. That's my opinion. That's how I see things. So, okay. So I hope that answers some of your thoughts and questions, Noel. If I have not covered what you needed, Noel, please feel free to add another thought to it. We have another question coming in. How often do we update the indicator with emerging markets, and when will we get the 2020 emerging markets in the tool? Oh, excellent questions. Okay, so the markets get updated once a year. And if there's ever a way in the future, you all would get it for free because you're all part of the Premier membership group. You would get for free any updates that would come out sooner than that. But right now, the data sources that I can reliably work with and trust, I really only can do it once a year to give us that read. We generally do the data processing in May and June and try to release before the end of the summer as early as we can. I don't know if we're going to be able to be on that timetable for now, because I don't know if the data is of a quality that is sufficient for us to work with in that rapid manner. I'll get it out there as soon as I can believe in it. The other part is that it will still be very much a look in the rearview mirror. I think we all have a good understanding now that basically what's happened is the market has changed substantially. It's not just a recovery that we would expect from a traditional financial change. It's about a virus. It's about something that's hard for us to know and understand. We still don't understand enough about how the virus works and behaves. We don't have a therapeutic to help us when we get sick. We don't have a vaccine to stop us from getting sick. And until we have those things, it's going to be really hard for us to say that this is an emerging market and it's going to continue to be one. So the data that comes out for 2020, when it does come out, is going to need to have a whole lot of caution on it, because it's going to be looking at data that reflects a different world. So in that sense, what I'd like to really say is there really aren't any good emerging markets this year that we can prove with data. It's all theory. It's do you want to say that medical markets are going to do better? So then you look at something like a Rochester, Minnesota. That doesn't mean all of you on this are going to go looking in Rochester and turn up something great, but we understand there are markets that are leaning towards medical delivery, medical research, medical care, and they may be one of the few places where we have a little bit of growth. I don't know how long it's going to take for other markets to grow in a traditional sense. We have an inclination. The Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan analytic group that Congress asked to keep an eye on the economy, expects that at the end of next year, 18 months from now, we will still have unemployment at 9.5%. And another economist who I've been watching suggests that we will not get to below 5% until 2028. We have a long recovery. So instead of being a V or a U, or we're more like getting into square root shape, where it's down, up again, but flattens much lower than the original height. Or maybe even what some economists are saying, a very interesting analogy to the logo for a famous footwear manufacturer, the swoosh, where it's a very slow and gradual, or maybe more like a hockey stick. For the hockey fans out there, we might have a bit of a really slow and long time. That doesn't mean we can't still do our business. Distressed sellers, distressed assets, look at tenant base, look at the economic occupancy, think about the jobs that people who would be living there might have, and just this is a great time to do a reset. With a huge number of new renters coming into the marketplace that we can't change because the demographics were decided 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, as kids were being born, and they're coming into the marketplace in very large numbers. They're going to need housing. They're going to have a lot less likelihood of buying. They're going to have a lot more likelihood of renting. So this is one of the best times for us to be in this market, when the prices have corrected properly, to not make it so hard on us like it has been for the last 3 years, and that we have the demand, and it's not here now. And so I take a deep breath, be patient, keep at it, and that would be my advice on that. So hopefully that answers that question. I'll answer the question that wasn't asked, but sort of implied by whether we're working with emerging market data, is when do the neighborhood markets get updated. The micro neighborhoods are on a cycle of at least 3 years between data refreshes for now. And one of the reasons why we do that is because neighborhoods actually change very slowly over time. And if there's any change, you might see, oh, there's a new building. I got A assets here. Isn't this a better neighborhood? Well, if it's one building with, let's say it has 70 units in it, and the rest of the neighborhood has another 170 units that are older, it's really hard to transform and make a massive shift in the overall character of the collective of all the multifamilies in that neighborhood. So it tends to take a while. You see construction going on, and they have to, finish the construction. They have to get the tenants in there, and then the data for it has to be in the systems to reflect that it's actually online and influencing the character of the neighborhood. So no one data point ever serves as the be all and end all. You're going to see when we release the new micro neighborhoods data that some of these areas on this map here that were previously considered green are going to be yellow, and some of the areas that are blue are probably at least green, if not even maybe yellow. So there are changes going on, and we will reflect those, and we'll have a new model out later this year. And we're also working very hard to actually tap into a new data source that will allow us to be more revealing over time, so that you have more pulse that won't be distracting but will be informative. So by doing enough averaging, we might be able to solve the problem of not having data that's good enough for every 3-year release, but maybe something a little more frequent than that. You'll all get all of that for free. It'll be super easy to use up here in your drop downs. Make sure I'll put my screen back on. I should have had that on for a long time. When we have the drop downs here in the Chrome tab, we're going to do that and just share the drop down menus in the upper left. You're going to see that these are going to expand and change over time. You'll get it all for free. You'll be able to make use of these drop downs to grab data from historical displays as well. So for example, when we go to emerging markets, you can see that right now. I guess what I'm showing here is that you don't all see when I do a drop down that a drop down has items in it. That's an interesting capability that it doesn't have. So what happens is this list of markets that are available in this drop down will continue to grow as we add more cycles of data. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. All right, do we have any other questions? Okay, so we got a comment here that a town is already billing out for telemedicine. That's a really good element of this. So there are some markets that, because of their smallness, if you will, they're more remote nature, or they're less New York or Bay Area, may have some possibilities. There are markets that are strongly already inclined towards medicine. So for example, I mentioned Rochester. Cleveland's probably a big market, even though Clinic is there. That's a tough one to work with, because there's so much other stuff going on in Cleveland that makes that market a little harder to work with. But Pittsburgh is a good medical market. DC, Washington, DC is a great medical market. We have a huge biotech and nanotech industry in Montgomery County, Maryland in particular, which is a suburb of Washington, DC. And there are a handful of other markets around the country that have very strong and robust healthcare, and they could potentially see some of this need for working on laboratory type experiments and environments like that. In addition to that, where we can do the telemedicine, where we can do the telecommuting, if people want to move back to where they used to live and they can continue to serve in their job, or maybe even as a nurse practitioner with providing advice. I know my health plan allows me to call and talk to a nurse before I even think about going anywhere. That's been the case for many years. So those types of jobs may loosen up much more than they have been. People will potentially have the opportunity to live much further away from a metropolitan area or in the next smaller market. So for example, in the DC area, it might be that places like Leesburg and even Winchester and Harrisonburg will become more attractive, because you'll still be close enough to your friends and family when you want to see them, but the cost of living is lower, the pace of life is calmer, and your employer is no longer requiring you to be on campus all the time, and maybe they'll even pay you to buy a desk and set up an office that's comfortable so that you can do more things like that. So that telework is really exactly the right direction. That will probably happen in most industries. My brand new television died the other week, literally brand new. I don't think I watched it more than an hour, and as a result of moving it in properly, it was done. So I needed a new one. So I was able to arrange the entire purchase by an online chat with somebody with one of the major electronics retailers, and got lots of information, lots of advice, no pressure, very patient, very helpful, and actually in many ways a little bit nicer communication. We talked a little bit about our worries and kids and how we were handling this, and it was really a very pleasant experience. And I went to the store and opened the trunk, and they put the object in the trunk, and away I went. And so I can have my television work for me. So, I mean, there's a lot of people who can work in jobs like that used to be in a retail environment that they could work from home. So we're really going to see a transformation in how we think about work. And that means maybe offices won't be nearly in demand like they used to be. We have another question coming in here. Can we have your contact information? Oh, that's a great question. So if you have not already been to a particular website that I'm going to give you right now, you'll want to go there and maybe bookmark it, because it does provide that information. We're going to make it even easier for you to get information. We're going to be having some new online training tools. We're going to have some new products you can take advantage of and add to your repertoire of knowledge and skills. So keep coming back here. As you can see at the top of my screen here, there is a web address that is support@reindicator.com. You can always email that. Myself or somebody on my team sees that regularly and frequently. So feel free to contact us at support@reindicator.com. And if you have not already visited the webpage of info.reindicator.com, you will see there's a phone number at the bottom of the screen. You can call that, and you can also see some videos, and we're getting ready to put a bunch more information and knowledge videos on that, and a reconfigured site. So we're going to make it even easier for you to get information and keep learning. This is the best time to sharpen your pencil and learn. Stay alert to things that are happening on the economics of the market you're looking at. There's going to be a lot of investment from government at some point. We're going to be spending money as a country, not just on unemployment benefits and PPE. We're going to start thinking long-term at some point, whether it's this year or next. We don't know yet, but infrastructure, we already know our roads and train stations and whatnot need help, but we also need to rethink how we do our broadband. There's probably going to be some money being put into that. Commuting is going to change. We might need to reconfigure trains and buses to make things easier and safer for everyone, including the conductors and drivers. And as I mentioned earlier, the biotech research is definitely an area where the government is going to be spending large sums of money. So keep your eye out. If you live in a market that has any of those things going on already, Atlanta, if you're on the line here, you might have a good upswing with your huge recent upsurge in jobs relating to cell phone related internet connections. So it could be a really exciting time. I know it's scary for all of us. I hope all of you are well and all of your families are well. But this is definitely a time for you to think that there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel at some point, and it's better to be ready for it than have it pass by and not take advantage of it. Yes, power grids too. Mike, you're right. The whole energy sector, as I mentioned earlier, is potentially going to be very different. Battery technologies are accelerating very rapidly. And some news we probably will see in the next couple of weeks coming out that will be very impressive on those fronts. We are going to be using energy differently. I know my air outside where I live is noticeably different and clearer. I think there might be some more incentive for us to think about how we can invest in cleaner technologies, no matter what we do, because if we're going to be spending money to create jobs, we might as well create jobs that have more than one good effect. So that's a good area for us to do that. And power grids are part of that. And microgrids, local power, there's a lot of things happening in that arena. So if you do live in a market that's on in an energy dependent focus, markets like Oklahoma City and Tulsa and Midland, Texas, and you all know where you are. You all know your market is energy dependent. Take a look and see whether or not there's some renewables and sustainables going on there, but it may take a while for them to get their traction again because their cost may not be competitive anymore. We don't know. It's where we're just a little bit early. I think we might actually have tipped the balance and have moved into renewables will be the standard bearer, but I'm not certain. I think we actually might have crossed the line. Even with a while back, we had free oil, cheaper than free oil. You're getting paid to buy the oil. So that may happen again, but it's probably a temporary thing. And but definitely energy grids are going to be needing some reinvestment because we're going to be living in different places. So. All right, I see we're at 3 p.m. I had scheduled this to complete about that time. If you have more questions, you can feel free to send them into support@orientator.com. And definitely, please go on to the website of multi.orientator.com where you get your maps, where you draw your maps, and watch for news announcements and videos. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate everybody who's been here and asked great questions. We will do this again soon. And I look forward to getting a chance to get you all more information at that time. So everybody have a wonderful weekend and think of some questions for our next chat. Thanks so much. And we'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.